Now on to Symfonos 4, which is the fourth installment of the Symfonos series. As with the others, we'll be trying to get unauthorized root access to the system and capture a flag. Let's get to work. So double-click the OVA file to import it. Click Import. Once the import is complete, highlight Symfonos 4 and go to Start. Once Symfonos 4 is booted up, switch over to your Kali Linux box. Just go ahead and open up a terminal here. We'll type in netdiscover-ieth1. After your netdiscover scan is complete, let's just run a simple nmap scan. So nmap-a IP address of Symfonos 4. This time we only have SSH over port 22 and HTTP over port 80. So let's just open up a web browser and check the IP there. Minimize this real quick. Open up a web browser. Just http:// and the IP address of Symfonos 4. So it looks like Poseidon. We have just an image, nothing good in the HTML here. All right, so now we're going to have to try to brute force some web directories with dir-b. So just minimize that for now. Back to our terminal. I'm going to just clear that out. And we will plug in the IP address of Symfonos 4. Okay, so we've only been able to find a bunch of default Apache files. Nothing helpful here. So let's try again a little bit differently this time. I'm just going to clear this out. And we are going to run dir-b again. This time with the -x switch, which is going to append .php to each request. So let's just run that real quick, see if we get any different results here. Okay, that was very quickly. We found nothing. So let's pull out a bigger word list and try this again. So I'm just going to use big.text. It's a much larger word list. So we're going to try that, see if we can get anything from that. All right, now we are in business. We have two different files discovered here. I'm just going to open them up, right click, open link. Do that for c.php as well. Okay, looks like c.php redirects to Atlantis. So both the same resource essentially. All right, well, let me view the source real quick, see if I can find anything interesting. Nothing particularly interesting here. So I'm just going to close this other tab. All right, let's try just admin. Nothing good there. All right, let's try some SQL injection. Okay, so not going to be that easy. Let's just set up our proxy real quick and use Burp Suite. So as you recall from the previous lecture, just go to Preferences here, type in Proxy, and click on the network settings. I have it set up here already. If you did not take the previous lecture or forgot, we just have to put in the loopback address here and port 8080, which is the default for Burp Suite, and use proxy server for all protocols. All right, so we can now open Burp Suite. All right, so if you notice here, I upgraded Burp Suite to 2020.2.1. It was 2020.1, but I wanted to make this VM that I give you as modern as possible at the time of this recording, so there you go. It might be different in a week, but we'll see when that happens. So we got temporary project. That's your only choice, and click next. Use burp defaults. Start burp. Now let's switch over to the proxy tab. We have intercepting on. We want to keep it on. And I'm just going to type in admin test, and click login. We're going to intercept that request right here in the proxy. So now I'm going to right click, send to intruder. All right, so let me explain what I'm doing here. We're just going to be taking a bunch of SQL injection payloads to try to bypass authentication. So instead of typing each one or copy and pasting each one at a time, we're going to automate that with Burp Suite Intruder. So let's just go to the positions tab. I'll show you how to do that. We're going to clear the automatically set positions, and I'm just going to set test and test as the payload positions. This is where we're going to send the exploit towards. This is going to be the payload position that we set. So attack type is going to be battering ram. And what that's going to do is it's going to send the payloads at both of these parameters at the same time, the username and the password parameter. So that's done. Let's go over to the payloads tab. And I have this, let's show you real quick. I have this small list of SQL injection payloads that are good for bypassing authentication. So I'm just going to paste that. I have it on my clipboard now. This little list is included in a text file that's attached to this lecture. So I'm just going to go ahead and click options, and we're going to set redirections to always. That's going to make it to where we follow redirections instead of just stopping at the subsequent response from the web server. So that's done. Go to the payloads tab and click start attack, and we're going to see if this works. Okay, let's take a look at these responses. We have two different lengths, 2058 and 878. That's the content length of the response from the web server. So we have the first response here. Let's just render it real quick so we can see it. Incorrect login. So that's obviously not a good response. We want to be able to bypass the authentication, and that is not it. So let's go to the 878 length ones, which also has a redirection that indicates it probably did work. So look at the response here. It redirected to c.php. And we have some sort of response here. Looks like a file parameter. So let's just use this request and see if we can bypass authentication. So all I'm going to do here is right click, request in browser in original session. Just click copy. And now I'm going to turn off the proxy, go back to the web browser, and just paste what we've just copied. So hit enter. All right. Very good. So we have bypassed authentication, and now we're in some page asking us to select a god, and we will see what that's about soon. But I want to show you how to do that manually if you didn't understand what we just did. So I'm just going to go back and show you one of these payloads that worked. So all we did here was type in admin. Well, it was admin, and then it was admin test, and then I set test as the payload position. So what happened was admin, and then one of these payloads. So a couple of them works. This is one of the one that worked. So we'll just paste that same exact string here in password, click login, boom, we bypassed authentication. So that's how to do it manually. I'd also like to point out that I used SQL Map to try to automate this whole process, and it was able to work, but I wasn't able to do anything with the data that was in the database. I got an admin hash that I was not able to crack, so it's a big dead end, and I didn't want to waste everybody's time by going through it, but I wanted to mention that SQL map does work, and you could have used that in a different capture the flag scenario, possibly. So anyway, let's go ahead and select a God, see what happens. We're going to just turn the proxy on to take a look at the request. All right, so when you click select a God, it includes a file parameter, and this one is for Hades. We've clicked Hades. All right, so it just describes who Hades is. Just take a look at the page source. Okay, there's 3 choices here: Hades, Poseidon, and Zeus. All right, that's unrelated there. So here you probably want to use LFI, local file inclusion, or directory traversal. So let's try using a bunch of directory traversal payloads and see if that works. So same thing as before. We're just going to turn the intercepting proxy on, select a God, click Hades. Now that you have that intercepted, right click and send to intruder. We're going to configure a different attack here. So real quick, what we're doing here is directory traversal, which is a technique that allows us to access restricted files by utilizing a payload such as .. in order to move outside of the web directory and access other directories. So I'll show you how that works. Now we have these payload positions. I'm going to clear that out. And we are going to put in .. And we're going to set a payload position. I'm just going to type in test here, highlight that text, click add, and that's going to be your payload position. So we have our directory traversal payload to the left here, and this is where each file is going to be inserted, or each file name. So now let's go over to the payloads tab. So I have a relatively large file name word list that I'm going to use right here. It's attached as a text file in this lecture, so you can access that on Udemy. Anyway, I have it on my clipboard, and I'm just going to click paste. So that's going to be our payload. We have 1,539 words, so this is going to take quite a long time if you want to exhaust this entire word list. So if you want to, you can skip past this because it's going to take a couple hours at least. Otherwise, you can wait it out. But I expect that you at least configure the attack and have knowledge of the concept behind it before you move forward in this lecture. So let's just go over to options real quick. I like to have redirections set to always. That way you can see where the request ends up after a redirect instead of just the subsequent web response. So do that and go back to payloads and click start attack to get this started. And let's just wait till that finishes. All right, so after a little bit of waiting, I clicked this length button here to sort it by length, and I see that we have one file that's different length than all the others. So let's just click on that. You see this is a URL encoded request to var log auth. So looks like we have a response from that file. All right, so I'm just going to right click that like we did before, request in browser in original session. We're just going to go up here. Let me just turn intercepting off for the meantime. All right, so as you see here, we have access to this var log auth file, and it is logging SSH login attempts. Very good. All right, so we're going to do this manually. I'll just show you real quick. So just .. // var log auth. There you go. Okay, so based on what I see here, we could potentially use this to execute code. We have a previous finding on Nmap, SSH, running on our target. And we can poison SSH with a line of code instead of a user, which would be inserted into this file. And since we can render it here with this directory traversal exploit, we could be able to arbitrarily execute remote code. So let's give that a shot right now. Let's hop over to a terminal real quick. So let's take a look at this SSH command. Instead of a user, we have this line of PHP code. So what we're hoping is that this line of PHP code is interpreted as PHP when it's loaded into this web page right here. So I'm hoping that once this is logged into var log auth, we're able to have this CMD parameter, and we can use that to execute arbitrary code. So let's go ahead and send that out. Type in yes when prompted, and it's going to fail. So I'm just going to type in whatever as the password, doesn't matter. And I'm just going to do that one time and Control C to cancel, and just go back here, and we're going to see if that worked. Okay, so let's try to leverage that CMD parameter. So ampersand CMD equals cat etc password. So what that's going to do is try to execute the command cat etc password to show us the results of that file. Scroll down a bit. Okay, so we have successfully run cat against that file etc password. As you can see here, that's the result. So now we have confirmed that we can execute bash commands. So let's use this remote code execution exploit to get a reverse shell. We should know how to do that by now. Just hop over to a terminal. So nc-nlvp, and I'm just going to use a port of 1234. And we're going to utilize a reverse shell payload. Okay, so starting from cmd equals, we're going to paste our reverse shell payload. It's just going to be one of those Python payloads we've been using this whole time. There it is. I'll just show it to you real quick, because it's kind of hard to see it there. All right, there it is. Now, what you're going to want to do, obviously, is change this IP address here to your IP address for your Kali Linux VM for the host-only interface. All right, so now that we have that covered, just hit enter. There we go. Now we have our reverse shell. Just go ahead and spawn a TTY shell for that. All right, very good. Check out to see if we have any sudo privileges. No, we do not. So let's check out netstat to see running processes. So we have netstat antup. All right, so we do not have netstat on the system either. So, okay, so we do have ss. So this is an alternative to netstat that gives us the same results. This is a perfect example of why it's important to know multiple different commands in case one is unusable or does not or isn't there. So let's just type in ss-tulpn. All right. We got MySQL running on 3306. And here's the SSH, port 80. We already know about all that. But here's one that we did not see on Nmap, 8080. That may sound familiar from the past exercise we did. So this time we do not have SSH credentials to get an SSH tunnel to access that internal service. But fortunately for us, there's another way around this using SOCAT. Let me see if SOCAT exists here. Yes, it does. Okay, so what we can do here is use SOCAT to create an SSH tunnel. So let's do that now. I just pasted that SOCAT command here. We're going to set up a tunnel with port 9999. So after running this, we're going to try to access port 9999 over Kali Linux's web browser. Let's go ahead and move over here. So IP address of Symfonos 4 and port 9999. All right, so we've come to this web page. It says cookie set Poseidon. Just going to go to main page. All right, I'm going to go back to where we just were and check the page's source. Okay, nothing to see here. So it says cookie set Poseidon. So I want to proxy this request to see what they're talking about with the cookie. All right, so we have intercept on right here. Just going to request that. All right, I see a base64 encoded username. Just going to highlight that and copy it. And go over to our decoder. Paste that string, decode as base64. We have a username of Poseidon, but more interestingly is this Pi object call. So what this is a base64 JSON encoded pickle object, specifically a Python pickle module for serialization and deserialization of Python object structures. So why does all this matter? Because we're going to use it to potentially execute code and get a privileged shell in the process. So if you want to learn more about Python pickle objects and everything I just described, you can go to the link that I have attached to this lecture and read up on it. Otherwise, let's move forward and try to exploit this service. So we're going to go to proxy. I'm just going to right-click this and send to repeater because we're going to modify that username parameter. All right, here it is. For now, let's go back to decoder. And I'm going to remove this and add a Pi object call of my own. And we do not want to decode this. We want to encode it as base64. So just click encode as base64. There we go. This is going to be our payload. So what this is going to do is send a Pi object call in the correct syntax here. And I have a netcat command that's going to send a connection back to my Kali Linux IP address. So this IP address needs to represent your Kali Linux's host-only interface IP. And I'm going to use port 5555. So before we run that, we're going to have to set up another netcat listener. So I'm just going to do Control-Shift-T to open up another tab. We're going to type in nc-nlvp 5555. Same port as we have in our payload here. And I am not going to use the plain text because that will be rejected by the web application. We're going to use this base64 encoded string. So we're going to just inject that right here into the username parameter. So clear out. There we go. So hopefully this will send a connection back to netcat, and we will see that right now. All right, I see from there that it did work. Let's just go ahead and get ourselves a TTY shell. All right, I see right away that we are running this as root. Very good. Let's go to the root directory. There's our flag. Perfect. Okay, we're done with Symfonos 4. Now let's move on to Symfonos 5, the last one in the series for this lectures.